Russian authorities have repeatedly complained about economic pressure from the West, particularly sanctions, arguing that it violates the rule of fair trade in international agreements. However, all Western sanctions were a response to Russia's aggressive actions and not justified. Moreover, the West, for example, did not impose sanctions against Russia after the war in Georgia. But Russia itself has never shied away from pressuring its neighbors to achieve political goals. In this video we'll talk about how Russia essentially imposed sanctions on various countries and engaged in economic blackmail. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia became the largest post-Soviet republic in the region and even bore the title of the official successor of the USSR. Russia is the largest post-Soviet economy, both in terms of territory and population. It also possesses vast reserves of natural resources, not limited to energy resources alone. Therefore, Russia immediately gained a decisive role in the post-Soviet space. Given the close economic ties between the former Soviet republics, Russia could use economic pressure to achieve its political goals. Russia's influence began to grow with the transition from the challenging 90s to the stable 2000s, when Russia began to receive substantial profits from energy resources and experienced significant economic growth. This allowed Russia to exert pressure on neighboring countries through trade and economic relations. The primary level of pressure on the post-Soviet countries was, of course, energy resources, oil and gas. Russian authorities repeatedly resorted to such pressure and imposed restrictions, literally for each post-Soviet country. Gas wars between Russia and Ukraine have been ongoing since the 1990s. There were two main issues: transit of gas through Ukrainian territory and pricing for the Ukrainian domestic market. In this context, mutual pressure was often applied. Russia could influence Ukrainian markets by setting high gas prices whenever a president not loyal to the Kremlin was in power. Ukraine, on the other hand, could exert pressure due to control over transit routes, not only for gas, but also for oil. This is why Russia built the Nord Stream and Yamal pipelines, to reduce such risk and apply more significant pressure. In any case, Ukraine has been heavily dependent on Russian gas throughout its recent history, and the Kremlin was well aware of this. There have been numerous instances of political pressure and gas cutoffs for various reasons. The first such conflict occurred back in 1939 due to unpaid debt obligations for gas supplies. Gas conflicts intensified during the presidency of Yushchenko, as mentioned earlier, and escalated with the arrival of an unsympathetic government. So the disputes began because Russia started raising gas prices for Ukraine. On one hand, this was a general trend in the post-Soviet space, when Gazprom transitioned to universal contracts for everyone. On the other hand, gas prices in Ukraine increased several times, even though Russia mostly just transited a significant amount of cheap gas from Turkmenistan to Ukraine. During negotiations, Russia even completely halted gas supplies to Ukraine during the winter. As you can understand, this carried significant risks. Nevertheless, this was the first major conflict that demonstrated how dependent Ukraine's market was on Russian gas. Of course, there were many discussions about moving away from Russian gas. However, this hasn't happened even to this day. With the arrival of the loyal Yanukovych to power, he started exchanging political decisions for gas discounts. Thus, the well-known Kharkov Accords were signed, which granted the Russian fleet in Crimea until 2042. In exchange, Ukraine received a 30% gas discount. Further gas problems occurred following the state struggle with the arrival of Poroshenko to power. Firstly, Russia simply seized oil and gas fields in Crimea and the Black Sea, which only postponed Ukraine's prospects of becoming energy independent. Secondly, 4 years after that, there were legal disputes with Gazprom. The court eventually ruled that the company should pay $6 billion for abuse in the Ukrainian market. Similar conflicts also occurred with closer countries, such as Belarus. The countries frequently clashed over gas issues. In 2004, Lukashenko even stated that Putin was blackmailing Belarus by cutting off gas supplies. For example, this pressure from the Kremlin led to the sale of the Beltrans gas company to Gazprom. In 2007, a controlling stake was sold, and by 2011, the company was completely bought out. At the same time, it's worth noting that Belarus practically always received oil and gas at Russia's domestic prices, giving it a significant advantage. For example, before 2020 sanctions, a significant part of the Belarusian economy was re-exporting Russian oil to Europe. Russia has often used energy resources blackmail against other countries. Against Moldova, it pushed for a new political alignment. Against Kazakhstan, which exports 80% of its oil through Russian territory, there was conflict. There was a conflict with Turkmenistan that resulted in a halt in the transit of gas to Europe. With the onset of full-scale war in Ukraine, Russia began to blackmail even all European countries, either by cutting off gas supplies, allegedly repairing gas pipelines, or forcing them to renegotiate contracts and pay in rubles. Russia actively uses this level of pressure, and it often works. Russia has periodically exerted pressure on countries by imposing simple embargoes on certain goods. Typically, this was related to political circumstances, but was formally explained by non-compliance with standards. Going back to Belarus and the so-called Milk Wars of 2009, when Russia essentially imposed an embargo on the supply of dairy products from Belarus to its territory. This had a significant impact on the local industry, since the Russian market was the main outlet for Belarus. It's believed that this happened in the context of Russia trying to take control of the dairy industry in Belarus, which Lukashenko did not want to give up. There is also a version that this happened because Belarus did not recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia. At that time, the Kremlin could not pressure Lukashenko on any issue and ultimately lifted the embargo. Similar situations arose in the future, with embargoes also imposed on other food products. A similar embargo was imposed on Moldova in 2014, immediately after the ratification of the association agreement with the European Union. A few days later, it was announced that the assassination violated the zone of free trade in the seas, so Russia introduced additional duties on Moldovan goods. And a week later, it was announced that Moldovan goods posed a risk of introducing the eastern fruit fly into Russian territory. Therefore, a complete embargo was imposed on many agricultural products. In the context of the economy, it's impossible not to mention hybrid conflicts in which Russia is involved. Starting in the 1990s, Russia used them to detach a part of a state's territory, create an unstable region there, and detach important economic zones. This weakens the states and makes them more dependent on their nearest neighbor. This happened, for example, with Georgia. About 20% of its territory was separated, and their status was in a gray area. This hinders the country's development and entry into Western institutions. In 2014, a similar scenario unfolded with Ukraine. Crimea was annexed, and Donbass fell into an uncontrollable zone. Ukraine lost developed and prosperous regions, and Ukraine was forced to invest in its military, deal with instability in other territories, and cope with an energy crisis due to a lack of coal. This seriously undermined Ukraine's economy. The example of Moldova and Transnistria also presents similar cases. In the uncontrollable zone of Transnistria, many of the country's largest energy facilities are located, such as the Moldovan power plant and the Dubasari power plant. This complicates Moldova's economic situation and serves as a significant lever of pressure, as Russian peacekeepers are stationed there. Another topic for blackmail has been the issue of labor migrants. This pressure was primarily exerted on Central Asia, specifically on Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. For the latter, half of the GDP relies on remittances from migrant workers. Therefore, pressure on the migration issue has been repeatedly used to influence these countries. A ban on entry into Russia can lead to significant social upheaval in these countries, since labor migration is a way of life for many of their citizens. The Kremlin is aware of this, so the migration issue is brought to the forefront and mass deportations occur. In conclusion, it's worth noting that Russia has exerted significant economic pressure on its neighbors for many years. It does so through energy resources, imposes embargoes on fabricated grounds, supports hybrid conflicts on their territories, and uses the issue of labor migration as an instrument of pressure. This video provides only some examples of such behavior, and there are actually many more. That's it for now, thank you for watching, don't forget to like and comment this video. See you.